Hi everyone, thanks for joining our final Frazer Jones View from the Top Global HR Director Virtual Roundtable session of 2020. Today we have a spotlight on professional services HR leadership across Asia. I'm Charlotte Matthew and I lead our financial and professional services HR practice across the region. Frazer Jones was set up over 20 years ago and we're proud to now be the largest HR search firm internationally. We have 118 HR search consultants spread across our 14 offices. But alongside our HR search work, our team also facilitate HR talent programs. We have our Rising Star program for our entry to mid high potential talent, but we also run this View from the Top HR executive program for our HR leaders. Part of our View from the Top program, and it was really based on feedback from our clients, is about bringing together our regional and global talent, all of which are going through similar challenges and having similar priorities across the region. So with this in mind, I'm privileged to be joined by three wonderful HR leaders spread across the region. And today we have Helen Snowball, the APAC CHRO at JLL. We also have Robert Clements, Head of People GWS at CBRE. And we have Abhishek Mittal, Director of HR Consulting at Willis Towers Watson. And he's joined us from an HR consulting perspective to really share some key research based on the recent months and challenges as well. So I'm going to hand over to the panel to allow you to give a brief personal introduction of yourselves. Helen, I'm going to start with you.
Fabulous, thank you, and lovely to be here. So thanks very much for the invitation. So look, so as you said, Charlotte, I'm the CHRO at Jones Lang LaSalle. So we're a leading global professional services company. Our head office is in Chicago, but we operate three kind of core geos, and I lead Asia Pacific. So within Asia Pacific, we have just under 45,000 employees across 18 countries. So really love the diversity. Got about 335 HR professionals who work underneath me. And I've been at JLL for just under 3 years. And prior to that, I was with Coca-Cola, Amatil in Sydney for 10 years, and then Kraft Foods in the UK. So did a bit of time in a number of different countries. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Helen. Rob, over to you.
Thanks, Charlotte, and great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. Yes, as you mentioned, I am the head of people, our people function for CBRE in the Global Workplace Solutions part of the company across Asia Pacific. Similar to Helen, with JLL, CBRE is a very multinational organisation covering many geographies. I look after Asia Pacific specifically and cover around 12,000 employees in this region for our GWS business. Have a team, HR team of around 90 odd, covering all the areas of HR services in the region. I've been with the company about 3 years, and it's a fantastic place to work. I'm really happy to be on the panel, and thanks for the opportunity again.
Thanks for joining us. And Abhishek, over to you. You'll need to unmute. Thanks.
Sure, and lovely to be here. My name is Abhishek, and I lead Willis Towers Watson's talent and organization consulting business for Singapore. And I also work with clients across Asia and the Middle East. I've been with the organization for a little over 12 years now. And personally, I'm really passionate about working with clients on driving organization and workforce transformation in the new world of work.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. So I've spent the last few weeks having one-to-ones with each of you, really covering off things like the future of work, but also the HR journeys that each of your organisations are going through. So we've had a few consistent themes throughout those conversations, and I thought it makes sense to sort of cover off each of those in turn today. Firstly, HR's role in supporting and driving business strategy. And then secondly, remote working and employee experience. Thirdly, we're going to cover upskilling and reskilling employees. And finally, leadership, wellbeing and culture, which is always a nice note to end on. Of course, these all interrelate, but appreciate if we could stick to these topics as best as possible, just from a timing perspective. And we probably could talk about each of these for hours. But again, I'll just direct a couple of questions at each of you throughout. And then if you do have any other topics you want to bring up at the end of each session, we can cover that off as well. So to kick off, I suppose, what a year it's been for our HR community. In the last 10 months, HR teams have had to make sure employees were supported with getting out of, but also back into, where possible, the office. Also pivoting to virtual working at record speed. So it's inevitable, really, that the first theme today will be around supporting and reviewing business strategy, which featured heavily with all of you. So I'm going to start with Helen. When thinking about business strategy and the future of the workforce, how have conversations evolved and accelerated in a Jones Lang LaSalle context over the last few months? And what key themes do your HR and global leadership team have at front of mind? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, Helen.
Oh, I think somebody muted me. No, that's
Yeah.
great. Look, I think you used a great word there, actually, Charlotte, when you talked about accelerate, because that's like effectively what I would sum up in terms of our kind of entire business and people strategy. So when I think about COVID, without a doubt, it has had horrific consequences on people's lives. But from a workplace and from a future of work perspective, I actually think it's driven us in the right direction at a much quicker speed than what we would have ever got. And the kind of things that we're working with the organization on at the moment, we call it kind of WWWW. So I'm sitting down with the leaders, talking to them about work. So, you know, actually we need to look at ourselves and actually acknowledge that the work people do and the skills that people need are going to fundamentally change. We are seeing that, and it's accelerated in the last 6 months. So what are we going to do in terms of being clear on the business strategy, the kind of jobs that are going to be required, and therefore the skills that are going to be needed, and what role is HR going to play in helping the organization to upskill? The second kind of W I call is the workforce. So we've got a real a strong kind of strategy around the types of employees. So one of the benefits of COVID, it's kind of exploded the talent pool that's available. You no longer need to just look at talent in the location that you're working. We can get the best talent available anywhere across the globe. So we're really kind of putting a comprehensive business strategy around, well, how do we target the best now that location is no longer a barrier? The third pillar is around the workplace. So, you know, not just in the short term, encouraging people to come back and make sure that they feel it's safe, but actually the longer term, what is the role of the workplace within any organization? And I know we're going to deep dive into that a little bit later. So maybe I'll pause there, but that's kind of one of our core business strategies. And then well-being. You know, what we're saying is, no matter what the business strategy is, I think one thing that has been proven over the last 6 months is the importance of putting our employees at the heart of every decision that we make, and their physical and mental well-being needs to be a priority. So ensuring that we've got the right well-being strategy so that people have got the right levels of energy and resilience in their tank to deliver for the business has been a key priority for us. And on top of all of that, JLL is kind of in the midst of reorganizing itself. So there's a whole heap of work around operating models and everything that kind of goes with the joy of organizational redesign. But those kind of 4 W's is what we're really honing in on at the moment.
Thank you. That's a really good way to kick off the session, actually. So I suppose a slightly similar question for you, Rob. From a CBRE perspective, can you give us an overview of key leadership, business and HR priorities, but also, you know, lessons learned from the pandemic so far, which might help shape the future in the organisation?
Thanks, Charlotte. Yes, I agree. I think it's certainly with Helen, it's been some challenging times for everybody, and our sympathies goes out to many people. Look, for us let me focus on 2 areas to answer your question. The first is really the business side of things and how our business has sort of responded to what's gone on. 3 key areas. One is really making sure that we've got the right skills for the future. Certainly the workforce capabilities required to succeed sort of post-pandemic world are different in some ways, but others have kind of reinforced some ways we've always thought about people and the skills that they need. We definitely see a need for people that have a very strong understanding of data and digital, and that they can create, if they can come in and create efficiencies and better ways of working to help our clients, that's important to us. On the behavioural side of things, the skills that we're really focusing on are people that have agility, resilience, innovative thinking, and people that can manage ambiguity. But also that's really paired with those sort of time-honoured skills such as collaboration, influencing, and the ability to achieve results despite a lot of adversity. These are really important qualities that our leadership are focused on in the business. The second area is really talent for growth. You know, what we've seen in our business is incredible growth over the recent years. And this has been particularly challenged with a lot of macro demographic changes that you're seeing in Asia. There are challenges of supply in building a diverse workforce. So for us, what we're trying to do is build a really strong base of technical skills to support our business. And I think that's true across a lot of service-based companies. Our focus is also on bringing a lot of experienced talent, as Helen mentioned, from sort of parallel industries, and sort of retraining them and reskilling them in CBRE's ways of working. We've also focused on graduates and helping them to accelerate once they come into our company. We've built the first ever industry certified facilities management framework, which is helping us, I should say, advance the skills in FM across the region and getting better outcomes for our clients. The third area is around leadership, you know, and it's been spoken about a lot, and I think we'll talk about it here. But that blended home office working environment, the role of the business leader has become so critical. Our leaders are expected to wear so many hats. It's really tough for them to be able to get through what they need to do. So our focus has been on really helping leaders to give them the skills, the tools and the networks and the support to not only be good leaders, but also to help them look after themselves and their own well-being during this time. When you talk about HR, I guess for HR, for me, there's three big themes that have come out. I know we'll explore it further, so I won't take too much time, but the first is engagement. I mean, we've seen employees working more and more from home, and that we think as they start to return to the office and work this sort of home and office blend, it's very important that we double our efforts to improve the way that we engage them. So setting up, during the pandemic, we set up more virtual settings where they could collaborate and they could get key learning that would help them. As Helen mentioned, the sort of safety and wellness thing has become really paramount for all organisations, particularly mental wellness. So finding ways to address things like isolation, uncertainty, home life stress, and feeling connected has been a big focus for HR as a function. And equally so for our employees, a lot of them are actually working on site during the pandemic, providing critical services to our clients and to the community. These people very much are our heroes in our company. And so what we've done is tried very hard to give them the support and the engagement so that they can carry out their services and feel safe and appreciated for their efforts. And the final area is about efficiency. Of course, you know, as was discussed, there's a lot of cost pressure going on as a result of the pandemic across the world, and it's leading to restructures. As Helen mentioned, it's also leading to dramatic shifts in the way digital is impacting work. So for HR, it's no different, and we're really focusing on accelerating our areas of process automation and technology to deliver our services more cost effectively. I guess that's a theme that we'll continue to see through 2021 as well. So there's sort of three areas within HR that I see as being important, but there's lots of stuff we could talk about, but there's some key highlights.
Thank you. That's a really, really solid overview. Abhishek, from a consulting perspective, what new priorities have you been engaging with your clients on, or what's sort of most in demand from a workforce and strategy perspective? It's interesting to get that angle.
Sure. I mean, look, we all recognize that we are probably living through the change of our lifetimes, really. And we are living through a situation where we have a global health crisis, a global humanitarian crisis, and a global economic crisis. And if I look at some of the data from our recent research, and I'm talking specifically about Singapore, about 2/3 of the companies here are expecting the pandemic to continue having a negative impact on the business over the next 6 months. And over 40% of the businesses are saying that they're not even sure what the impact is going to be over the course of the next 2 years. With all that kind of uncertainty that we are experiencing, our data indicates that globally, about 40% of the organizations are looking at some form of restructuring. Either they have already done so or planning to do so in the very near future. So that's the kind of a world that we are living in. And I see two kinds of mindsets that are kind of prevalent right now. The first mindset is more in terms of weathering the storm, right? So it is all about staying the course, staying where we are, making some incremental changes, and hope this passes. Whereas the other kind of mindset is really to ride out the storm, to seize the opportunity that the pandemic has presented to us in a way. And here we see business leaders ask the fundamental question that now that we have changed so much, we have accelerated digital transformation, we have changed the way we deliver products and services. Now, how do we really pivot to a new business strategy and a new operating model? And consequentially, the questions that is posed to HR and consultants as well is that, what kind of an organization do we need in the future? How do we look at our cost bases? And not just from a perspective of cost management, but really from a perspective of how do we actually reallocate investments in talent? The question also is that what kind of a workforce do we need in the future? What kind of skill sets are going to be required in the future? And how do we truly deliver a great employee experience amidst this crisis and amidst the hybrid environment that we are in?
Great, thank you so much. Is there anything else that Helen or Rob wants to add off that, or otherwise we'll move on to remote working and employee experience?
I think just to build, when you hear Abhishek talk about, economic crisis, financial crisis, health crisis, I don't know whether you guys use the quote that Milton Friedman sometimes uses, the Nobel Prize kind of winner, and what he says was, only a crisis, whether it's actually or perceived, drives real change. And I've been using that kind of within the business at JLL and saying, to your point, Abhishek, we have two choices here, right? We can pretend we're just going to press pause, ride it out, and hope everything's going to go back to the way it was, or we can take this as an opportunity to really accelerate some of the changes, particularly in the future of the work, that were actually already trending. And I actually think it will be such a wasted opportunity if businesses don't seize the moment and actually kind of ride, the wave and get some sort of benefit out of this once in a lifetime crisis that we've all kind of led through. So that's certainly the mindset that I'm trying to instill at JLL.
Great. Lovely. Well, we'll move on to remote working and employee experience then. Mercer's research found that 1 in 2 firms across APAC and 66% globally have arranged for greater flexibility to work from home going forward. The report also showed that employers are taking the opportunity to evaluate which roles can work from home sort of full time in this future new structure. Rob, I want to get your thoughts on remote working in terms of how it impacts engagement, but also your thoughts on managing virtual teams effectively.
Yes, thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? And it's as Helen was saying, it's a topic that's accelerated our view of the workforce and how it's changed. I think work from home has always been there, it's increased over many years, of course, especially as technologies advance and the internet quality gets better across the world. You find that more of this outside of office working becomes viable and increasingly viable. So the pandemic really accelerated what was already occurring. But equally, I think the role of the office will become even more critical as we move forward. But it's because I think what we see is that employees need a connection point, right? They need to be somewhere that they can come together and collaborate, where they can bond in their teams and they can learn from each other. And we've seen, whilst technology is great, it's also limited in a way that you just can't get what you get when you meet people physically. So that's going to be important rhythm to be able to establish this work from home versus the work from office as we come back into the office and start to recover fully from the pandemic. Of course, those that are working at home, as I mentioned before, engagement with them becomes more challenging. In our business too, a lot of our staff are working with our clients on site and often in remote places. So we're kind of used to having to think creatively about how to engage them anyway. But certainly our focus has increased a lot. And for me, there's 3 key areas that we're focused on. It's been mentioned before, and I think it will be a recurring theme throughout this discussion, is this idea of health and wellness. The relative isolation has really been a big deficit, as we've said. So our focus has really been on how do we get the physical place set up for people to be able to work effectively from home. Understanding that there are limitations of constraint around space and technology for some people. It's been important to give employees space and time to find their rhythm and to focus on enabling them to measure the results. Enabling them to do their job and be less focused on measuring their time and their presence. Focusing on outcomes has been particularly important. I think it's also been important to help develop our empathetic and caring leadership practices. This is something we've focused on in our learning and getting our senior leadership to advocate internally through our fireside chats and other forums. The second real topic around work from home, it's been particularly area for us to dial up, is relationships. You know, both at home and on the office front, we've definitely been challenged. Trust is critical to building successful working relationships, you know, and our ability to do this has been compromised. And certainly in more conservative places, work from home is a topic that's not really been well accepted in the past, but now it's accelerated, which is a great opportunity for us to embrace that. We think communication is key. Creating additional and deliberate virtual forums has been a focus, and to create connections, both formally and outside of work, to help bridge the physical gap. For leaders, it's about managing expectations and being clear that what your needs are as managers and employees. And it's also to get the best, to try and get the best out of the environment. As leaders, our role is to enable an environment where communication flows easily and employees feel safe to share their needs and also empowered to act upon them. I think the third area really is just around having an environment where you can continue to perform and be productive if you're working from home. So that has been really an area of focus for us as well. Some employees are more disposed to work from home than others. Some of us like to have that physical contact. So understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are in that regard, and then just working with employees to help find ways of working that are effective for them will help you be more productive and help that relationship thrive during a more work from home based environment.
It's such an interesting point. It'll be interesting to see what happens longer term, won't it? Helen, from your point of view, what are some of the latest thoughts about what the office of the future might look like from a Jones Lang perspective?
Let me just unmute myself. Yeah, look, so first and foremost, I kind of sometimes think that, because we work in real estate, everyone's going to assume that, we say the office is not dead. But I actually genuinely believe that. I 100% agree that, employees now want flexibility. That will not change. And work from home has many, 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 many benefits. But what I would say is I see the future of work as a blended option. And the office will still be central and it will still be the heart of an organization. Will it look and feel differently? Yes. But will it be the core of a business? I truly believe it will. And, Charlotte, I remember when we were chatting, I was telling you about the story of 9/11. And, I speak to some of my, the real estate guys who've been around for a long, long time. And they were telling me at 9/11, there was an immediate reaction, a very emotional reaction that pretty much said there will be no high-rise buildings built ever again. So in terms of real estate, we need to start thinking about what that means. And very, 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 very quickly, kind of within 12 to 18 months, opinions have changed, and we've got probably more high-rises than we ever have. And I kind of feel like something similar is going to happen with COVID. There's been an initial kind of, we don't need an office, and there can be some short-term savings, and everybody loves flexible work. But actually, if you talk to your people, what they are looking for is a blend. They want the office. And I think, when I think about what will it look like and what we're thinking about, we're pretty much saying it'll move from, in my opinion, a lot of individual desks, kind of what the traditional office looks like, and it will definitely expand into much more space for innovation and collaboration and kind of learning and socialization, because I think what the office will do is that will be its role. It will be to build the culture, assist with learning, connectivity, and true innovation. Because honestly, as much as we've all got used to this technology and it's amazing, there is nothing better, and Rob said this, there is nothing better than actually being with a group of people in a room and kind of, spitballing ideas. Like, you just can't generate that. In my humble opinion, I haven't been able to yet, as well as you can when you're together. So what we're certainly doing, and the work that we're doing and where we're consulting with our clients, is you will need footprints depending on your business growth trajectory. The size of that footprint might change, but it's going to look and feel differently inside. And the other thing, as well as the look and feel and the space, we also need to think about this whole topic of well-being. So what does that look like? Ensuring that our people genuinely feel not just physically but psychologically safe, that when they come back into a workplace, whenever that might be, all of the appropriate checks and balances have been done. So the office is not dead, but it will look and feel different, in my opinion.
Yeah, an exciting new chapter. So Abhishek, what does the data indicate about what the impact of remote work is on the employee experience post-COVID-19?
Sure, Charlotte. And like a good consultant, maybe I'll just use data to answer this question. So this is something that we have been pondering over. And what we did very recently is that we took a subset of companies where we had employee feedback data over the last 2 to 3 years or so. And this was in a time when most people were working on site. For the same companies, we also collected data from employees over the course of this year, when a majority of the people were actually working remotely. And what we found is that the employee experience is actually higher in a remote working experience, remote working environment. And this, in a way, creates some kind of an advantage, from a remote work perspective. But very interestingly, what we found is that this advantage actually seems to diminish as we go lower down in the organization. So let's take some themes here. So, employees want to be connected with the overall purpose of the company, and they want to find, how they fit into the bigger picture. They want to have access to great work opportunities. They want to have access to great development opportunities. They want to have meaningful relationships at work. They want managerial support, and they want to have a voice in how things are done. And what our data seem to show is that all these factors are really high when it comes to senior leaders in the organization. And as we went down to looking at middle management populations, first line supervisors, and down to frontline employees, that advantage seems to diminish. So while there are clear advantages, in terms of a remote work, when it comes to things like flexibility, a sense of balance, a sense of, not having to commute and all those good things, but there are some downsides that we need to be quite mindful of. What we find from our data is that stronger connections get stronger in a remote work environment, and weaker connections get weaker in a remote work environment. As a result of that, people, especially young people, may miss out on growth opportunities, on opportunities to get coached by seniors, on opportunities for learning and development, on opportunities for taking on challenging assignments. And then not having the right kind of enablement support, whether it's from a perspective of infrastructure, technology, or managerial support, can also really affect productivity levels. One thing that we also found is that while collaboration levels are pretty healthy across the board in a remote work environment, and we have all developed these new muscles for virtual collaboration, leaders are saying that the speed of collaboration is not optimal, really. Because what we have done is we have gotten used to more of synchronous collaboration virtually, but we have not really adapted to a lot of asynchronous or impromptu collaboration. And again, the issue here is really that this is a problem that's not going to go away. Our data indicates that roughly about 20 to 30% of employees will still be working remotely after the pandemic is over. So this is not a prediction about next year. We're saying in a post-pandemic world, 20 to 30% of the workers will still be remote. And what HR will need to continue to solve for is to really assess what work is suitable to be delivered remotely. What is our readiness levels, and how do we really create that enablement support, that infrastructure support, and realign HR practices as well to make that a reality?
There's lots for us to think about there. Rob or Helen, any comments on that?
For me, probably just to back the point up around data, so everybody has got an opinion on this topic, and what we're encouraging the business to do is to use the data, but to pulse the organization. So at the beginning, when we pulsed kind of just as we were going into COVID, everybody loved working from home. Everybody loved the flexibility, and it was kind of like, oh my God, are we going to be able to get people back into the office? And then we pulsed 3 times over an 8-month period, and it's fascinating how things have changed. People have gone from almost 70% of people saying we want to work from home permanently. You fast forward 6 months, and 70% are saying we actually want a blended option. We're not saying we want to come back 100%, but actually we don't want 100% to be at home anymore. So I think it's really, really important if you are going to put the employee at the heart of your decision making, and if the experience matters, I do think we have to be careful to not make some long-term decisions when we're actually in the middle of, quite frankly, still a bit of a crisis and an experiment, because you could get some short-term gains in costs now, but actually you could lose long-term due to employee kind of losses in productivity, retention, etc., etc. So I'm a big one. I completely agree with you. We need to take out the emotion and just use the data to decide on some of our business strategies and next steps.
That makes a lot of sense. Great. Okay, well, we'll move on to our third theme of today then, which is upskilling and reskilling employees. Helen, in our one-to-one, you mentioned JLL is really focusing on this area. I'm interested to understand a bit more narrative around upskilling and reskilling as the world becomes increasingly more automated. Can you share some additional context, I suppose, in terms of the sorts of programs that you're focusing on to make sure that skills don't become obsolete, and also preparing the workforce for the future?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So we've kind of got 2 pillars of work that are underway at JLL. So the first one is actually currently it's non-JLL employees. So it's part of what we see, I guess, our corporate responsibility. So in the world, like we all know, the degree of unemployment is at record high levels, and we feel as a major corporate that we've got a responsibility to try and do something about it. So first and foremost, we've got a strategy around trying to give employment opportunities to local workers in all of the 90 countries that we operate in, and actually targeting people that we probably would never have looked at in the past. So if you think about, the airline industries or the hospitality industries, the industries that have been hit very, very hard, and those skills, one could argue, could end up being classified as legacy skills. What we're doing is we're trying to think a little bit differently and say, okay, well, if you used to be, an air hostess on a major airline, actually you probably got great customer service skills, you're probably great with clients. Why couldn't we reskill you to come into the organization and work somewhere within, our FM business? So that's one of our pillars. We're really trying to play our part in the community to actually, encourage and give opportunities to people who've got legacy skills. The second pillar is for our own employees. So, one of my concerns is that, even with the restructuring and the unfortunate redundancies that a lot of organizations are facing, employees might have secured their employment for today, but will they have employment in 5 to 10 years time? Because will the skills that they have today still be relevant for the jobs that we think are going to exist in 5 to 10 years? So we've been working incredibly hard, and it is hard, right? Because no one can truly predict the future. But what we do know is we kind of know the buckets of competencies that are likely to be needed. We know that, I think Rob talked about this, we know that, data and analytics is going to be key. We know that you're going to need a really innovation mindset. We know that our leaders are going to have to be far more agile. They're going to have to be able to live in the grey. We know that they're probably going to need more resilience than they ever have. We know that, human-centered design as a concept is going to need to be a must as opposed to a nice to have. So we've kind of mapped out some of the competencies that we know are going to be needed, and then we've tried to work back and say, okay, let's prioritize parts of our workforce, and let's ensure that we're starting to upskill our employees now so that they truly have those skills so that they can pivot to kind of the future of work. So, you know, some of the programs we've developed ourselves internally, but a lot of the programs we've acknowledged we're not the experts in. So we've put a lot of new partnerships in place, and we've really gone out there and got some kind of leading thinkers, both in the real estate industry, but more from a technology perspective. And we've created things like the Real Innovation program, or academy actually we're calling it, which really you know, helps our people think, well, first and foremost, it helps demystify some of the jargon that's out there. So actually, you know, everybody understands, you know, what AI means and what robotics means and etc. And then we start to try to help people make sense of the change, not fear the change, like not be worried about your job may go because it might be taken over by a robot, but actually, you know, actually accept that change is going to happen. So how do you embrace it, get ready for it, and upskill yourself? And then start to kind of then put some of that strategy into place and innovation into place, and use some of the training programs. So you kind of get a double benefit. You upskill your people, and then you get those employees to actually apply their learnings through actually helping us to kind of transform some of the business strategies that we have in place. So it's been incredibly well received by our employees. They really appreciate the investment. And we've just had to pivot very quickly from the kind of traditional development to a really futuristic approach, and just try our best to demystify and help people embrace what's actually coming.
Yeah, that's really positive to hear as well. And Rob, upskilling and reskilling employees across Asia, can you give us a bit of a view from a broader professional services Asia perspective? Oh, sorry, Rob, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, excellent. Yeah, look, I thought about this one, and you know what? Professional services is inherently a people-based business. So we provide, you know, services and both physical and, you know, consultative to our clients. So our primary focus is on the quality of service delivery and obviously the capability that's needed to advance that. The digitization aspect of it, because a lot of people talk about reskilling and new skills in the context of digital transformation and disruption. Certainly that has relevance to our industry, as been mentioned. But I also think that inherently it's about the quality of service and the quality of relationships that we provide and have with our clients and our stakeholders, both internally and in the community. That's where value is really derived. So to support that theory, I think there's two areas that we are focused on, and I see, you know, many companies also doing this, and Helen's touched on it as well. This idea or this area of need around technical skill sets. The technical skill sets that enable you to deliver quality service to clients is definitely in limited supply across Asia. And that's largely being driven by population demographics that are against us in many markets. There's also, and I admit it, there's also a lack of appreciation or maybe awareness that the types of service-based careers that CBRE, JLL and others provide is not always there. So our focus is really just trying to work with industry, with governments, and also drawing on our own internal capability to develop really attractive and viable, interesting career pathways for people. So that whether they're coming in laterally from other industries or whether they're coming from a university or a college, they have a really clear pathway through CBRE to be successful and realize their career goals. I think one of the characteristics that we've tried to respond to is that for the younger generation and the workers coming through at that age profile, there is an expectation that they are clearer with the opportunities that are there. So just trying to give more visibility, but also just providing them with the tools that they need to be able to navigate their own careers, because they do very much like to be empowered on that regard. The other area really is around behavioural and leadership skills. And, you know, that's been touched on throughout the panel discussion, but I think it sort of taps into this idea that because of the pandemic, but, we've been dealing with the VUCA world for a while now. There's this ongoing need for people to be very agile, to be curious, ask questions, but more so with COVID to be resilient and adaptable to what is an ever-changing landscape. So to give people the behavioural skills to do that, to give them the space to be able to innovate in a way that's perhaps outside the traditional organisational procedures and structures is important, so that we can learn quickly and adapt to what is always been a really competitive environment for professional services, but more and more so it's being challenged across lots of different variables that we have to respond to meet both client needs but also our employees' needs.
Yeah, very good point. And Abhishek, from a consulting perspective, how's the pandemic affected work models, but also what frameworks do Willis Towers Watson recommend for reinventing jobs and increasing productivity?
Sure, Charlotte. So yeah, I mean, of course, the world of work is changing dramatically. And when it comes to these changes, my favorite quote is that, when you look around day by day, nothing really changes. But when you look back after a period of time, you find that actually everything has changed. And that's what is exactly happening in our world today. And I'd like to illustrate that a bit, with some data as well. So back in 2017 or so, we conducted our very first Future of Work survey. And what we found back then was that across Asia Pacific, about 13% of all the work that is performed is touched by some degree of automation. Okay, and at that point of time, companies predicted that that pace of automation will probably go up to about 22% by 2020, which is where we are right now. So it will double over the course of 3 years. Now, we collected some fresh data, and just last month, we found that the actual proportion of work that is impacted by automation currently across Asia is about 35%. So it has grown 3 times over in the last 3 years, really. And that has meant a profound change in how work's getting done. There is obviously a lively discussion going on in terms of how technology and robots are going to eat up all the jobs. But what I believe is that the fundamental unit of analysis is not a job. The fundamental unit of analysis is actually task. Because technology or automation does not really affect a job in its entirety, but it affects specific tasks that a job performs. And those tasks need to be analyzed based on 3 factors. Firstly, we need to ask ourselves whether the work is physical in nature or cognitive in nature. Secondly, we ask whether the work is independently performed or interactively performed in collaboration with others. And thirdly, we need to ask whether the work is repetitive or variable. And if you start applying those 3 factors, you will find ways to redesign jobs to really increase productivity. Let's take, for example, a client that I was working with, and we were studying the finance function for them. And what we found was that there were a number of tasks that finance professionals perform, which were cognitive, but they were also independently performed and repetitive in nature. Let's say monthly financial reports, for example. And those become prime candidates for applying robotics process automation. Or there are tasks like data entry. And again, nobody loves data entry. Nobody comes to work saying that, yay, I'm going to be doing data entry today. But that could be, augmented by use of artificial intelligence, image recognition, and automating that process as well. In effect, what that does is to free up bandwidth for the job holder to work on more value-added tasks, like, for example, better business partnering, really. So if we use technology smartly, if we are smart about redesigning jobs, I feel that not only can we boost productivity, but also create better engagement, create more meaningful work that people really enjoy doing, open up more learning and development opportunities in terms of reskilling and upskilling, and also open up potentially new rewards opportunities, in terms of compensating people differently for the skill sets that they bring to the table.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other points on that topic? No? Okay, we'll move on to our final theme of the session, which is leadership, wellbeing and culture. The general consensus amongst leadership is that similarly to strategy and the structure of the workforce, the role of leaders will also change. Helen, what are your thoughts on how HR can work with leaders to shift mindsets and behaviours, but also creating more emotionally intelligent leadership teams who live and breathe their values and consider things like well-being, which is increasingly important?
Yeah, great question. So I think, sticking with the theme of data, I think what we've done at JLL pretty well in the last few months is because we've been pulsing the organisation so regularly, we've got a rich set of data in terms of the responses of our people, like how our people are feeling. And what that data will tell you, in black and white terms, where you kind of can't debate it, is that, there has been and there still is an awful lot of anxiety and stress and concern across the workplace. And whether that's, people anxious about, am I going to have a job in 6 months? Whether or not that's just stress because people are feeling isolated and actually, not as connected to their work colleagues, whether it's just the pressure of, having to do a job and look after young children, whatever it might be, you can't hide from the data, which tells you that, your team needs support. So we've been first and foremost using that data to then set up a whole suite of what we've kind of called, leadership fundamental development, which is acknowledging that, we are in crisis mode and not everybody finds it easy, to be as empathetic as what is needed right now. You can be a good leader from a directive perspective, but actually, do you have that emotional intelligence, and do you have the ability to really show the empathy when it's needed? So we've done a lot of training kind of trying to show that just because somebody looks this way behind the scenes, there could be a lot else that's going on with your team members, and really tried to give some of our leaders just some top tips and some skills in terms of how to approach those conversations, what kind of support they can provide, and then also behind the scenes kind of give them a whole suite of other tools that if they're feeling like they're getting a little bit out of their depth, that they can go to pull the right resourcing. The other tactic we've used at JLL is we've tried to unmask our professionals. So I kind of call it, you need to self-disclose, right? You need to bring the person behind the professional into the workplace. Like, long gone the days where, your work and your home life were separate. They're one now. And, the more we encourage our leaders to be vulnerable, to self-disclose, to say, I am having a really crap time and I am stressed myself, and, it's been working for us. We've been profiling and doing podcasts and webinars with a lot of really senior people who have not only, been humble enough to share some of their experiences, but also then been courageous enough to share some of the learnings and the top tips. So I think a mixture of using the data and taking the emotion out, giving some really good targeted leadership development, and then asking really your leaders to unmask themselves have been things that's worked at JLL.
Yeah, it's lovely to see people be a bit more human, I suppose, in the workplace as well, isn't it? Rob, what are your thoughts on leadership agility and resilience in the workplace? And what are your key observations and advice on supporting employees who might be slightly burnt out or struggling with work-life balance and mental health?
Yeah, it's certainly, it's one of the biggest topics facing the corporate world, isn't it, around mental health? And I'm happy to touch on that shortly. Look, in terms of leadership agility and resilience, I hear agility, the discussions about agility, and I've mentioned it already. And it's easy, I guess it's easier said than done, especially when everything you've learned and relied upon in your professional life is now challenged, especially with digitization and transformation and disruption that's going on. But I mean, we have to learn to adapt in order to survive. So really equipping yourself, and if you're an organization, your leaders with those skills, as it's been discussed here, is vitally important. Giving them an understanding of what they're really good at and what they need to develop and how they can repivot and reskill themselves to be able to take the opportunities that come up to you is obviously super, super important. But really just being curious is critical as well for agility, so that you can understand that the world is changing around you and that you need to adapt. Conversely, I think the workplace also needs to adapt to permit and promote and value experimentation. If you're being agile and you're being curious and you're showing those leadership competencies, but your organization is not promoting them, it's going to be hard for you to be successful and to actually feel like you're making progress. So I think it's a deliberate effort on both the organisation, and certainly we focused on this in the way that we construct work and the way that we give people freedom to be able to look at experimentation in order to be able to become more agile, more responsive. But certainly that's a key factor. On resilience, I think, look, resilience has been tested more than ever this year. I think everybody appreciates that. But one of the key aspects of leadership resilience, I think, is self-awareness. Often leaders are expected to, and I think Helen touched on this a little bit too, often leaders are expected to be stoic and project that sort of unwavering confidence. But really, this is unrealistic, especially during these times. You know, employees are looking for authentic leaders, people that balance both resilience and some form of vulnerability to be more genuine and to build stronger and more meaningful connections, especially when you can't physically be together. So it's more important than ever to be authentic in that regard. But for many leaders, it's not easy to do this. Being vulnerable and can feel quite unnatural. So our focus and what I would encourage leaders to do is to really explore that fully and to be confident that you can express that vulnerability on sensitive topics as well, such as mental health, which is impacting so many people around the region. I think it's also important that not to take vulnerability too far. I mean, at the end of the day, we are in leadership roles to lead. We need to be confident and assured in our actions, as this creates confidence and commitment in our people. Lastly, just on the work-life balance and the burnout, I mean, I'll put that under the topic of wellness. And it's, you know, as I said, I think it's the HR and organisation topic of 2020 and probably 2021 as well. What we've realised is that wellness is much more than just stress at the workplace. It's more comprehensive, and it includes things like the home environment and also the individual's physical health. You know, certainly this year, our companies focus on the whole of the person rather than just the work that they do and how they are experiencing their workplace has extended beyond that to how they're experiencing their life, because their life at home is impacted because they're working from home. So that's quite a shift for organisations, and I think that does require a change in the way that you educate and the way you engage. So it's a tough one. Look, on a personal level, excuse me, what I try and do is treat your mental health just like you would your physical health. And that's a new concept for many people. I love to exercise, I like to run, I like to keep fit, but I never really thought about that these pursuits were also fueling my mental health. So I really encourage people to look at setting routines around your mental health, do things like meditation and yoga to calm your mind, because I think it's really, really important. Also look at your diet and look at getting different perspectives. Go out and get some sun. I know often sitting inside all the time, you're just not getting enough sun. And just take your time off, right? If you're having holidays, take the holidays, unplug from your work, and spend time on things that matter to you, your family, your friends, and your interests. One thing I've certainly learned from this whole wellness topic and working from home is that we're just not role models for our employees anymore. We're actually role models for our families when we're working from home, and they're watching us, and very much we need to set the right example for them.
That's a really interesting angle. I'm conscious of time, so Helen, I'm going to come to you for the final question. As an HR leader in Asia, what main piece of advice would you give for other HR professionals at the moment?
Advice. Okay, so I'd say two things. First and foremost, I think if you're in HR, you made the right choice. But if you're in HR, you've got lots, you're commercial, you're strategic, you're all of those great competencies, right? But inherently, you're also a carer. And part of our personalities is we spend all of our time looking after everybody else in the business. And the one thing I am trying to instill in my team at JLL, and I would say to everybody on this roundtable today, is it's really hard to be a source of energy for others when your kind of fuel tank is only half full. So your priority as a HR professional is actually looking after you. So to Rob's point, making sure you're eating well, you're exercising, because when you're fit and well, mentally and physically, you can actually do your job better for others. And the second thing I just want to say, if this is okay with you, is I genuinely feel HR professionals are the heroes in every organization at the moment. And if you're sitting listening to this and you don't feel that, that's a real shame, because most organizations, if anything has come out of COVID, they are truly, truly valuing their HR leaders and their HR professionals. So when you kind of finish 2020, and hopefully all of you get some downtime, just sit and reflect on what you've actually contributed and you've actually achieved to your business, and be proud. Like, so rest, recharge the batteries, but really, really be proud, because we've learned a lot as a profession and we've added tremendous value to every organization and every employee at a time when they really needed it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think that's a lovely note to end on. Does anyone have any questions for each other? Otherwise, I'll close. No. Okay. Well, I think as we approach the end of the year, I just really hope that the HR community takes a very well-deserved break as we embark on a further year of unknowns. It's really vital that we continue to collaborate, pay it forward, and be kind inside and outside of the workplace. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us today. If you're watching this recording and you're interested in participating in our 2021 View from the Top, please do reach out to one of our team. Stay safe, and we wish you all the best.